The first time I heard the workshop's back room come alive at midnight, I told myself it was a ghost. Turns out I was half right. Someone had been hiding inside my boss's shop for 3 years, working in the dark, leaving no trace but perfect repairs, and by the end of that winter, I would be the only living person who knew her name, and the only one who'd ever promised to keep it. My name is Theo Lansing. I was 30 when this started, and I had spent the previous year becoming an expert at one thing, convincing people I was fine. I used to run my own woodworking business 2 towns over. Small, just me and a borrowed van, and a workshop I rented above an old feed store. I built furniture people kept for life. I was good. I was also broke. Because being good at making things and being good at keeping a business alive turned out to be 2 completely different talents, and I only had the first one. When the feed store sold, my lease evaporated, and the math that had been quietly drowning me finally pulled me under. I closed the doors, sold the table saw I loved more than I'd loved most people, and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a town called Harrow's Bend, where nobody knew I'd failed. That's the part nobody tells you about losing a thing you built. It isn't loud. There's no dramatic crash. It's just a slow morning where you realize the dream is gone, and the only person who noticed was you. So when I saw the handwritten card in the window of a narrow shop on Maple Street, help wanted, steady hands required, no talkers, I almost laughed. Then I went in. The shop was called Vale's Timepieces. It smelled like brass polish, old varnish, and coffee that had been reheated 1 too many times. Clocks covered every wall. Mantel clocks, wall clocks, a grandfather clock in the corner so tall it had to duck. And not one of them agreed on the time, which somehow made the silence underneath all that ticking feel louder. Behind the counter sat a man in his late 60s with white hair, a leather apron, and the kind of posture that told you he'd spent 40 years leaning over small, precise things. "You hear about the card," he said. "Not a question. I am. Can you work wood?" I told him I could. I told him about the furniture, the cases, the joinery. I did not tell him about the closed doors. He listened without expression, then slid a cracked walnut clock case across the counter. A beautiful old thing with a split along the grain and a hinge torn clean out of the wood. "Fix that," he said. "Talk less." I worked on it for 2 hours at his bench while he pretended not to watch me. When I handed it back, the seam was invisible, and the hinge held like it had grown there. He turned it over in his hands for a long moment. His hands, I noticed, had a faint tremor, the kind a man works hard to hide by keeping them busy. "Desmond Vale," he finally said. "You start Monday. Don't be early. I hate cheerful." That was the whole interview. What I didn't have yet was any idea that the shop had a second life I wasn't invited to. For the first 2 weeks, the job was simple. I refinished cases, replaced cracked glass, sanded and stained and oiled, while Desmond did the delicate internal work at his bench. The gears, the springs, the tiny brass hearts of those machines. He barely spoke. He drank black coffee, listened to a radio station that only played static and orchestras, and corrected my work by silently redoing it in front of me, which is a humbling way to learn. But I started noticing things. Small things. The kind you don't see until you've stopped looking for them. There was a door at the back of the shop, past the supply shelves, painted the same dull green as the wall so it almost disappeared. Always locked. Desmond never went in while I was there. When I asked once, just casually, he said, "Storage," in a voice that closed the subject like a slammed lid. Then there were the repairs that didn't add up. Desmond's hands shook. I'd watched him fight that tremor for 2 weeks. Watched him set down a screwdriver mid-task and flex his fingers. Watched him squint and breathe and steady himself before the smallest cuts. And yet certain pieces came back from overnight, looking like they'd been touched by a surgeon. A music box with a comb so fine I couldn't believe anyone had repinned it. A pocket watch escapement rebuilt with a tolerance no shaking hand could hold. Work that was, frankly, better than what I'd seen Desmond do in front of me. I told myself he had good days and bad days. I told myself old craftsmen have tricks. I told myself a lot of things, the way you do when the truth would complicate your nice simple life. And then one Thursday I left my phone charging at the bench and drove all the way home before I noticed. It was almost midnight when I came back, key already out, expecting a dark and empty shop. The shop was dark. But under the green door at the back, there was a thin line of warm light, and from behind it came a sound I'll never forget. A single clear note, then another, then a small cascade of them. A music box, mid-repair, Being tested. Someone was in there. Someone was playing it like they were apologizing to it. I stood frozen in the dark among 100 ticking clocks, and the smart thing, the simple thing, would have been to grab my phone and go. Instead, I knocked. The music stopped instantly. Dead silence. Then a voice, low, careful, female, said through the door, "Desmond?" "No," I said. "It's Theo. I work here. I forgot my phone." A long pause. The kind of pause where you can feel someone on the other side of a door deciding their entire future. "Then take your phone and forget you heard anything," she said. "Are you okay in there?" "I'm fine. Go home. Theo, who works here." I should have. I want that on record. But there was something in her voice. Not fear exactly. More like exhaustion wearing fear's coat. And I couldn't make my feet move toward the exit. "The music box," I said. "The comb work. Was that you?" The silence changed shape. Then the lock turned. The door opened maybe a foot, and a woman looked out at me through the gap. She was around my age, maybe a year or two younger. Dark hair tied back with a pencil through it. A flannel shirt with the sleeves pushed up, a magnifier loop still pushed onto her forehead. Her eyes were sharp and gray, and currently doing a full inventory of me, trying to decide how much of a problem I was. "You're the new one," she said. "The woodworker. He talks about you. Well, he complains about you. That's how he talks about people he doesn't hate." "And you are?" "Cleaning the place after hours," she said smoothly. "Cash job. Don't tell the boss. You repinned a music box comb to clean the place." She held my gaze. I held hers. Behind her, I could see the back room now, a second workbench, far more organized than Desmond's, lit by a jeweler's lamp, tools laid out in rows like a surgeon's tray, and a wall of work in progress that was, I realized, all the impossible repairs. Every single one. "You're going to keep asking questions," she said. "Aren't you?" "It's kind of my one flaw." She sighed, and something in her shoulders dropped. A person setting down a weight they'd carried so long they'd stopped noticing it. "Ren," she said. "I'm Ren. And the man you work for is my father." She paused. "Who has no idea I'm here. And it needs to stay that way. I want to tell you I handled this with grace. I didn't. I stood there in a dark shop at midnight, processing the fact that my private, gruff, talented boss had a daughter who secretly came in after hours to do his finest work, and that I'd apparently stumbled into a family's most carefully guarded room. "I don't understand," I said. Ren looked at me for a long moment. Then she stepped back and opened the door the rest of the way. "Come in then," she said. "I'm going to need you to understand, because as of about 90 seconds ago, you're the only other person who knows. This is the part where I should explain what I walked into, because it changed everything for me. Desmond Vale had been losing his hands for 2 years. Not dramatically. Slowly. A tremor that started as an annoyance and became a thief, stealing the precision that had been his entire identity for 40 years. Vale's Timepieces wasn't just a shop. It was his late wife's father's shop before it was his. 3 generations of marriages and funerals and town history measured out in the clocks people brought in to be saved. Desmond had promised his wife, before she died, that he'd keep it open. And now the one thing the shop required, steady hands, was the one thing his body was taking away. He'd never close it, Ren said. She was sitting on a stool, turning a tiny screwdriver over and over in her fingers. A nervous habit. He'd die at that bench first. But the work started slipping. People noticed. A regular took a clock to the city instead of him last spring, because the repair before that hadn't held. I watched it break his heart in a way I didn't think anything could anymore. "So you came back." "I came back." She said it like it cost her. "I trained in this shop since I was 9. I'm better than he ever was, actually. Not that he'd say it out loud. I'd moved away. We hadn't spoken much in years, him and me. After Mom died, She stopped. "That's a longer story than you've earned. The short version is, I came home one night, let myself in with the key I never gave back, and fixed the clock he'd given up on. I left it on his bench, said nothing, and he thought he'd done it. He thought maybe he'd had a good night. So I gave him more good nights." She looked up at me. "He gets the credit. He keeps his shop, he keeps his promise to my mother, and the town never has to watch a proud old man fall apart in public. That's the arrangement. Does he know it's even possible He thinks I'm 300 miles away living my own life," she said. Which I let him believe, because if he knew I'd given up everything to come hide in his back room patching his pride, he'd never forgive himself. And honestly, her voice dropped. I'm not sure he'd forgive me either. We didn't part well. I stood there in that small warm room full of half-mended things, and something in my chest pulled tight. Because I understood it. I understood exactly what it was to love a thing so much you'd disappear to protect you. I said. She blinked. Okay, what? Okay. I won't tell him. Your secret's safe. I forgot my phone. I heard a clock. I went home. Ren studied me like she was checking my work for a hidden flaw. Just like that, just like that. Then, because I couldn't help it, on one condition, her jaw tightened. I knew it. What? That comb you repinned tonight. Show me how you did it. Because I've been pretending I know what I'm doing for 2 weeks, and I'd kill to learn from whoever actually does. The wariness in her face cracked. Not a smile, exactly, but the door to one. Pull up a stool, woodworker, she said, and don't breathe on the comb. That was the first night. There were a lot of nights after. Here's the part I didn't see coming. I started staying late. Officially, I told Desmond I wanted extra hours to get ahead on the case backlog, which he grunted at and approved, because more work for less complaint was his idea of heaven. Unofficially, I'd clock out at 6, drive around the block, park 2 streets over so my van wouldn't give us away, and come back at 9 when Ren let herself in through the alley door. We worked. God, we worked. She taught me things I didn't know wood could do. How to read a music box cylinder, how a case and a movement have to breathe together, how the difference between a repair that holds and one that fails is sometimes 1/4 of a millimeter, and a willingness to do the boring thing 40 times. I taught her things too. Finishing techniques, a trick for invisible inlay, the kind of patience you only learn after you've ruined enough good walnut to respect it. And somewhere in those nights, between the brass and the static and orchestra radio she'd turned down low, I stopped being able to lie to myself about why I was really staying. It started as small things. The way she'd push the lope up onto her forehead and forget it was there, and I'd have to physically stop myself from reaching over to take it off. The way she narrated her work under her breath like the clock could hear her. Come on, you stubborn old thing. Hold for me. The way she'd hand me a cup of that terrible coffee without looking up. Like the gesture had become automatic. Like I'd been there longer than weeks. One night she was leaning over a particularly nasty escapement, frustrated, and a strand of hair fell across her face. Without thinking, I reached out and tucked it back. My fingers barely brushed her temple. She went absolutely still. So did I. The whole shop ticked around us. Neither of us said anything about it. But she didn't pull away either, and when she went back to the escapement, her hand wasn't quite as steady as before, and for once, it had nothing to do with skill. You're staring, she said, not looking up. You're good at this. It's hard not to watch. That's not why you're staring. I didn't answer that. I think the not answering said more than anything I could have. I learned the rest of her story in pieces, the way you do with people who guard themselves. Never all at once, always sideways. Usually past midnight when the defenses get tired. Her mother had been the warm one, the bridge between Ren and her father. Desmond loved his daughter the way some men love. Fiercely, and silently, and badly. All of it locked behind a face that never moved. When her mother got sick, Ren had wanted to come home and help. Desmond had told her not to. Told her to keep her job and her life. Said we're fine. Don't fuss. Because fussing meant admitting his wife was dying. And admitting it would have killed him. So Ren had stayed away, and her mother had passed, and Ren had never quite forgiven her father for the years he stole from her in the name of not being a burden. So you came back to take care of him, I said one night. The exact way he wouldn't let you take care of her. She went quiet for a long time. I didn't think of it like that, she said finally. But yeah, maybe I came back to do it right this time, even if he never knows I'm doing it at all. She gave a small, broken laugh. Which is the most vile thing imaginable. We love each other so much we can only do it in secret. I reached across the bench and put my hand over hers. Just that. She turned her hand over so our palms met. And we sat like that for a while. Two people who'd both learned to disappear to protect the things they loved, finally being seen by someone who got it. Theo, she said. Yeah. This is a terrible idea. Whatever this is. Probably. My life is a back room. I don't exist in this town. I can't do the normal version of this. The dinners, the daylight, the meeting the father. Her voice caught on that last one, and we both heard the irony of it. I know, I said. And you're still here. I'm still here. She looked at me then. Really looked. And the air between us got thin and electric. And I absolutely knew, that if I leaned in another 6 inches the whole careful arrangement would change forever. I leaned in. So did she. And a clock on the wall behind us chose that exact moment to strike 2 in the morning, loud as a fire alarm, and we both jerked back and burst out laughing, and the moment shattered into something lighter but no less real. Saved by the bell, she said, breathless. That clock has terrible timing. It's a clock, Theo. Timing is the one thing it's supposed to be good at. But I drove home at 3 in the morning grinning like an idiot at empty streets. And I understood that I had walked into that shop a man who'd given up on wanting things. And somewhere between a green door and a music box, I'd started wanting again. Then the commission came in, and everything got harder. A woman named Eleanor Pratt walked into the shop one gray afternoon, carrying a wooden case the size of a small suitcase, and set it on the counter like she was setting down something holy. Inside was an automaton, a music box with a mechanical figure of a girl who, when wound, was supposed to lift a tiny lantern and turn her head. It hadn't worked in 40 years. It had belonged to Eleanor's mother, and her mother's mother, and the town's historical society wanted it for the centennial exhibition in 6 weeks. The showpiece, the heart of the whole display. They say you're the best, Mr. Vale, Eleanor said. They say if you can't fix it, no one can. I watched Desmond's face. I watched him look at the impossibly intricate mechanism. Gears within gears. A cam stack like a tiny city. And I watched him understand, in real time, that 2 years ago he could have done it, and now he could not. His hands betrayed him just looking at it. I saw the exact moment his pride collided with his limits, and I saw which one he chose. It'll be ready for your centennial, he said. You have my word. After Eleanor left, he sat down heavily and stared at the automaton for a long time. Then he did something he'd never done in front of me. He flexed his trembling hands, looked at them like they belonged to a stranger, and said quietly, to no one. 40 years. I almost told him right then. I almost said, Desmond, your daughter is in the back room every night and she can fix this. And she came home to save you. And she loves you so badly she's made herself invisible. The words were right there. I didn't say them. They weren't mine to say. That night I brought the automaton to Wren. She unwrapped it and went pale. He took this on, she said. He actually took this on. Can you do it? In 6 weeks? Working 3 nights a week in secret while also doing his entire normal backlog so he doesn't get suspicious. She let out a long breath. Maybe. Barely. If nothing goes wrong. She looked at me. Things always go wrong, Theo. Then we go wrong together, I said. I'll do the case, the figure, all the woodwork and the finish. You do the heart. We split the impossible. She stared at me. And there it was again. That look. The one where she was deciding how much of a problem I was. Except this time the answer in her eyes was the good kind. You'd do that, she said. For a man who barely speaks to you. For a secret that isn't even yours. No, I said. I'd do it for you. The radio played static and a faraway violin. Wren set down her loupe, came around the bench, took my face in both her clever steady hands, and kissed me. It wasn't careful. It wasn't a question. It was a woman who'd spent 3 years being invisible deciding, all at once, to be seen by one person completely. I kissed her back like the failed business and the closed doors, and the year of pretending I was fine had all just been the long way around to getting here. When we finally broke apart, she pressed her forehead to mine and laughed shakily. That was a terrible idea, she whispered. The worst, I agreed. Do it again. She did. The next 5 weeks were the best and the most exhausting of my life. We built that automaton back from the dead one night at a time. I rebuilt the case where the wood had rotted. Carved a new lantern for the little mechanical girl to hold. Matched a 40-year-old finish so perfectly, I was proud in a way I hadn't let myself feel since I'd lost my shop. Wren did the work that made me believe in something close to magic. Rebuilding the cam stack. Recutting teeth on gears smaller than grains of rice. Coaxing a dead mechanism back toward life. And in between, we fell the rest of the way. When she thought a repair was going well, I learned she took her terrible coffee with 3 sugars and would fight you about it. I learned that under the careful guarded exterior was a person who'd been waiting a very long time for someone to stay in the room after they saw the real her. I learned what her face did when she was about to cry and refusing to, and what it did when she finally let me hold her at the end of a long night. And I learned that I would happily rearrange my entire life around being the person she let in. "What happens after the centennial?" she asked me one night. We were sitting on the floor of the back room, backs against the bench, the automaton finally faintly working between us. "When this is done, when you don't have a reason to come back at midnight, I'll find a reason. Theo." "I'm serious." I turned to look at her. "Ren, I didn't fall for you in a back room because it was secret and dramatic. I fell for you because you're the most alive thing in a building full of stopped clocks. I'm not going anywhere when this is done." She didn't say anything, but she leaned into me, and the little mechanical girl lifted her lantern and turned her head, and for 1 second the whole hidden room felt like the brightest place in the world. Then, 8 days before the centennial, everything I was afraid of happened at once. Desmond came back early. It was nearly midnight. We'd lost track of time the way you do when the work is good. The automaton sat finished on the bench, and Ren was making one last adjustment, and I was watching her face in the lamplight, and neither of us heard the front door of the shop until it was already closing. Footsteps. Slow. Familiar. Ren froze. Her eyes went huge. There was nowhere to go. The back room had one door, and it led to the front of the shop, and the front of the shop now contained her father. "Theo?" Desmond's voice. "Whose van is that 2 streets?" He stopped. He'd seen the light under the green door. The door that was supposed to be locked. The door that was open now, with both of us inside it. The door swung the rest of the way open. Desmond Vale stood there in his coat, keys in his hand, and looked at his daughter. The daughter he believed was 300 miles away, sitting at a second workbench in the back of his own shop at midnight, surrounded by every repair he'd taken credit for, holding a finished automaton he knew full well he could no longer have built. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the clock seemed to hold off ticking. "Dad," Ren said. Just that. The word came out like it had been waiting 3 years to be spoken. I watched it land on Desmond's face. I watched him do the math, the impossible repairs, the good nights that weren't his, the daughter he'd told to stay away, the whole secret architecture of his preserved pride collapsing in front of him in one terrible second. His mouth opened, closed. His hands shook harder than I'd ever seen. "How long?" he finally said, and his voice was not angry. It was something much worse. It was broken. 3 years, Ren whispered. "The Halloran clock. The Pratt pocket watches. He looked at the automaton in her hands. "All of it. It was you. The whole time, it was you. And you let me." He stopped, because the rest of the sentence was, "You let me believe I was still the man I used to be. And a man like Desmond Vale would rather die than say that out loud." "I didn't want you to know," Ren said, standing now, the words tumbling out fast. "I didn't want you to feel like, I knew if you knew, you'd close the shop, you'd think it was charity. You'd never let me. I just wanted to keep it open for you. For Mom. I promised her too, Dad. At the end, I promised her I'd take care of you even if you wouldn't let me." Her voice cracked clean in half. "So I did it the only way you'd allow. I did it where you couldn't see. And here is the moment I'll remember for the rest of my life." 40 years proud Desmond crossed the room, took his daughter's face in his trembling hands the way she'd taken mine, and pressed his forehead to hers exactly the way she pressed hers to mine. And I understood, finally, where she'd learned it. "You stupid, stubborn girl," he said, and he was crying, and he was laughing, both at once. "You're better than I ever was. You think I didn't know? You think a man works 40 years at a bench and can't tell another hand from his own?" He pulled back and looked at her. I knew the work wasn't mine. I told myself it was the shop's ghosts. Because the truth was that my daughter came home and I was too together, proud to walk through my own back door and say thank you. They held on to each other in the middle of 100 clocks, and I stood there feeling like I was witnessing something I had no right to. And Desmond looked over Ren's shoulder, straight at me. "And you," he said. "You knew?" "I did," I said. "I'm sorry. It wasn't mine to tell." He looked at me for a long, weighing moment, the same look she gives, deciding how much of a problem you are, which had found mine somewhere in the chaos and was gripping it tight. And his eyebrows went up about a 1/4 inch, which I would later learn was the Vale equivalent of a gasp. He said. We'll talk about that later. But he didn't let go of either of us when he said it. The Centennial automaton was the star of the exhibition. The little mechanical girl lifted her lantern and turned her head for the whole town. And Eleanor Pratt cried, and the Historical Society called it a miracle of restoration. When the curator asked who to credit, Desmond Vale stepped up to the microphone, cleared his throat, and said, in front of the entire town, "The shop is Vale and daughter. It always should have been. My daughter Ren did the work. She's the finest clockmaker in 3 counties, and I'm done letting her stand in the back." I watched Ren in the crowd go absolutely scarlet, and then absolutely radiant, as 40 years of her father's silence finally turned into the one sentence she'd never let herself hope for. She found my hand again without looking. By then, she did that automatically too. The sign on Maple Street changed a month later. Vale and daughter. Timepieces. New paint. Both their names. Ren works in the front now, in daylight, where people can watch the best hands in 3 counties do the impossible. Desmond works beside her, doing what his hands can still manage, and supervising the rest with the relentless, loving criticism of a man who finally has someone worth teaching. They fight constantly. It's the happiest I've ever seen either of them. And me? I run the woodshop side now. Cases, restorations, custom work. My name's not on the sign. I don't need it to be. I had a sign once, and it taught me that the thing I actually wanted wasn't to be seen by a whole town. It was to be seen, completely, by one person who stayed in the room. I asked Ren to marry me almost a year to the day after I knocked on a green door at midnight. I didn't do it with a crowd. I did it in the back room. The original one, the secret one. Now just storage again. But storage, that means everything. I'd built her a music box. The one piece of this whole craft I could honestly say I'd mastered. Taught by the best teacher alive. When she wound it, it played badly. Because I am not the clockmaker in the family. And a tiny carved figure of a girl lifted a tiny lantern. And behind the figure, where the cylinder should have been, was a ring. "You made me an automaton," she said, hands over her mouth. "A bad one." "The worst," I agreed. "Marry me anyway." She did. She said it the way her father says important things. Quietly, like the words cost something, like she meant every letter. Then she kissed me in the room where I'd first heard her play, and somewhere out front 100 clocks that finally all agreed on the time, ticked us into whatever came next. Desmond gave a toast at the wedding. It was 4 sentences long. The last one was, he knew how to keep her secret. Turns out that's the same skill as keeping a promise. "Welcome to the family, son." It's the most he's ever said to me at once. So that's the story of how I forgot my phone one Thursday night and found my boss's daughter hiding in the back room. And how the secret I promised to keep turned out to be the thing that gave me a whole life back. I think about it a lot. That arrangement she had. Loving someone so much you'll disappear to protect their pride. But here's what I learned in that shop full of stopped clocks. The people who love you don't need you to vanish. They need you to walk through the back door and say the true thing out loud, even when your hands are shaking. So let me ask you, what would you have done if you'd discovered a secret like that? Someone you worked for, someone you were starting to fall for, hiding the most important thing about themselves to protect somebody they loved? Would you have kept it? And have you ever loved someone so much you tried to take care of them in a way they were too proud to let you? Tell me your story in the comments. I read them, and the ones about the people you'd quietly disappear for always get me. If this one moved you, do me a favor and leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.